Like most vehicles of this vintage, my car's got a bit of cancer. But the problem today, in fact, is something different. It's been a slow leak that I've been sitting on for some time. I've got a slow drip of ATF right there. And you can see it's dripping down from the transfer case. But in fact, the leak is occurring right at the junction of the transfer case and the transmission. Now, if you look closely, right in the center there, you'll see a little weep hole. And that hole is designed to leak fluid if any fluid accumulates at the junction between the transfer case and the transmission. And so I've got a leak either in the seal of the transmission or a seal to the transfer case, and I can't tell which. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to remove the transfer case and I'm going to replace the front seal in the transfer case and the rear seal in the transmission. That should deal with the problem. Let's get started. Of course, anytime you're going to do a repair where there's even a small chance that you might damage a sensor, it's reasonable and appropriate to remove the negative pole of the battery. I started off by putting the vehicle up onto 4 jack stands. I don't really like to do this because the vehicle's more unstable in this situation, but I need the room. Okay, my next step is going to be to take this skid plate off. I did toy with the idea of leaving a skid plate on as kind of a pry bar to remove the cross member back behind it, because we're going to have to get that cross member out. But the dealer's manual says to remove the skid plate now, and so I'm going to do it now. Here's the top surface of the skid plate. These are all 15 millimeter. This one and this one, that one and that one. Leave these two alone and take the whole thing out. So here's the fill, here's the drain plug. Following good practice, we'll undo the fill first. This is a 3/8 Allen wrench. And it's ATF draining out of here, which is why it was difficult to tell which is which. I'll give you a close-up view of my ID tag. Alright, now before you take the cross member off here, you've got to support the transmission, and there's not that much weight on it, just the weight of the transmission really. And so I've used a block of wood here. So to access these, you need a deep 15 millimeter socket to get on this one to accommodate the end of the bolt, and the head of the bolt's a 13. Don't be surprised that if the bolt comes off, you have trouble finding the nut, so it helps to have a magnet to snag it out. And don't forget these two bolts here. They're 15 millimeter with a deep socket. Okay, the next are these vacuum tubes that are attached to the transverse member. So this is a 3/8 bolt. Metric don't fit here. The 3/8 bolt will undo this, and I've labeled this just in case I undo this vacuum tube here. I'm not sure I need to do it, but it's labeled in case I do undo those. At this point then the transverse member is free, and I should be able to bang it off with a little persuasion with a hammer. Well, getting this cross member off is a lot harder than it looks. It's quite tight. You end up prying and banging it with a hammer. One thing I did notice is that the frame of the vehicle is tighter right in this area here. And so once you get it down and clear these two bolts here, then you can bang the whole thing posteriorly, and it gives you a little bit more room to move it downward. Okay, now the cross member is off, so I'm going to undo this 15 millimeter bolt and then one on the other side so that I can get at these. I think these are 16s, these 4 bolts, and then this plate will come right off. Okay, now the rear propeller shaft. We've got to undo these little bolts here. These are 3/8 bolts. Don't use metric because they'll slide off. Also note that I have marked the location of the propeller shaft so I can put it on in exactly the same position it was on before. Honestly, I'm not sure that makes a difference, but everybody does it, and there's no reason not to. Of course, one other thing to note, if you didn't put the emergency brake on, you'll be able to turn the wheels like this, and the whole shaft and the wheels will turn, and so you can get at the ones that are harder to get at. But on the front, you got to undo the bolts on both ends. These 4, and then on the front side near the front diff, you undo these 4. You can see I've marked it again. And we've got it in neutral, both from the perspective of the transfer case and the engine. And so it's pretty easy to turn all of these propeller shafts. Of course, if the front propeller shaft turns, it's hard to get leverage, and so I put a lady slipper in here, a pry bar in here, pressed against the frame, and then to get better leverage, just giving myself room. This is a 5/8 wrench. I hate it when they mix metric and SAE. Okay, I've got all the bolts out, and now what I need to do is I need to slide this back so it compresses itself here to give me room to slide the shaft out. And it's a bit hard to show this while holding the camera, but basically you put a pry bar in here. Let's see if I can do it with one hand. Pry bar in here and pull back. There. And that releases it from the universal joint. Now watch out for these caps. These things can't come off. If they do, you'll be replacing the universal joint at the same time. Not a big issue, and in fact, it might be a wise idea to have a look at these universal joints while you're in here and replace any that look bad. Okay, we're on the right side again. Let's identify some normal structures. This here is the electrical connector to the downstream oxygen sensor right there. And it's attached up top. It's kind of in my way, so I'm going to get rid of it now. You notice that I used a quick tie. I had this oxygen sensor off, and the normal connector is a press fit, and it wouldn't come off for me, so I just cut it. But the right way to take it off is just use a pry bar and you squeeze it in and pull it out. It's just a press fit, kind of like the inner aspect of a lot of doors. Well, with the propeller shafts out of the way, it's easier to identify some things here, and so I'm just going to take a moment and identify some normal structures. Here's the transfer case, and the transmission pan. And right here and here are the transmission cooler lines. And here's the shift linkage. Now make sure you don't bump that, because that'll shift the vehicle out of or into gear. I had one misadventure years ago where I made a mistake and did that, and the whole vehicle lurched while I was underneath it. Now in behind here is the front band adjustment screw. My finger's on it right there. So if you want to adjust your bands, the front band adjustment screw is here, and the rear one you have to go through the transmission pan to get to it. This is a 46RE transmission, by the way, and the identification tag is right here, engraved in the side. Now, carrying along here, we've got the park neutral switch that tells the vehicle what gear you're in, and if it malfunctions, the vehicle may not start. And then behind there's another connector here, all covered in some grease. Now, moving along further, there's another sensor here. I think this is the transmission output sensor, this one here. And then these vacuum tubes that go to the CAD housing for shifting. Now carrying along the back, this is the companion flange for the output shaft, the propeller shaft. And this is the transfer case shifter rod here with the adjustment screw. I'm going to try not to move that. And then this is the poppet screw. And then further in the back we've got some vacuum tubes. This one here just pulls right off like that. And then in behind we've got a vent tube. So I'm going to take that off after I put the camera down.